Computer systems in cars are the new normal. Advanced tech can break, though. Go to carshield.com, code HERD. It's a warranty. It's the best. America's #1 auto protection provider, or call 800-CAR-6000. Mention the code HERD. Good to have you in. Nick Wright joining us in 10 minutes. Bill Simmons, founder of The Ringer, the BS podcast, Bill Simmons podcast. So here's a story that's not going to happen, but it's being reported, and I'm not. The Miami Herald continues to report this. The Dolphins are trying to get the #1 pick from Cincinnati for a bunch of draft picks. I'm very rarely shocked in sports. I've said this before. I read Andre Agassi's book. He did meth. Shocked me. That's one of those. Oh, O.J. Simpson's on the freeway running from police. Not gonna lie, head spinner. Not shocked a lot in sports. I'd be shocked if Cincinnati moved off this. So let me just say that. I think aggressive wins. But Cincinnati is kind of trapped here. And so I think it's incredibly unfair for me to say Cincinnati have some guts and at least not provide some context. Beyond the fact that Joe Burrow is from Ohio, and that's a big part of this. Beyond the fact that he was the college football story of the year and can sell tickets, and that's a huge part of this. If you trade Joe Burrow to a better situation, he's going to win immediately because he's a very good B-plus prospect. I don't think he's an A-plus prospect like everybody else, but I think he's a very, very good B-plus prospect who, if given a very solid coach and a lot of good pieces and a reasonable division, can win now. Absolutely. We've seen that. I mean, Kyler Murray didn't win a lot last year. If you'd put Kyler Murray on Baltimore and put Lamar Jackson on Arizona, Kyler Murray would be winning a lot of games right now. We know that where you land matters. I think Miami's a better situation than Cincinnati. First of all, they've got momentum. They won 5 of their last 9 games. Secondly, they have a much easier division. Brady's gone. The Jets are still the Jets. Third, Miami's got a defensive head coach. I think they have a better head coach than Cincinnati, and I think he did a great job to shore up the weakness of the team corner and linebacker. He shored it up in free agency. Now they're going to go heavy to offense. And so there's a lot of things, and that division strength matters. So if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and you trade Joe Burrow for 7 picks, which I've argued you should do, he's going to go to Miami with all those already good receivers. It's the one part of the team that's good, wide receivers. And you put Joe Burrow with an improved defense, those wide receivers, and they use all these picks to upgrade running backs and O-line, he's going to win 7, 8, 9, 10 games. He's a good prospect. Good prospects into good spots win games. Carson Wentz was a really good prospect. Philadelphia is a well-run organization. Didn't take long for him to win games. Okay, Russell Wilson went to Pete Carroll. Smart guy, John Schneider. What do you know? First year, won games. Deshaun Watson, surrounded by good offensive pieces. Don't always love the Texans, but won games. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. Sat 1 year. Next year, won games. So if you trade Joe Burrow in your Cincinnati, you're almost guaranteed to be trading him to a better situation. I mean, outside of Jacksonville, what's not better than Cincinnati having to face the Ravens twice, the Steelers twice, and that Browns filthy roster twice? So, and the other thing is, it's different than moving off Peyton Manning knowing he's going to win somewhere else. Because the Colts had a Super Bowl and division title, so they had equity with their fans. When the Colts, which I argue needed to move off Peyton Manning, they already had equity built up. When the Packers moved off Brett Favre, they had equity in a Super Bowl and division titles built up. Take the New Orleans Saints. So Joe Burrow was a star at LSU. Down the street, hour drive from New Orleans, Baton Rouge. If the Saints had somehow been able to get the #1 pick this year, let's say, they worked a trade a year ago and they had the #1 pick, and they passed on Joe Burrow, they have equity. Fans in New Orleans would be like, oh, I love Joe Burrow, but, our guys win Super Bowls and win division titles, and they know what they're doing with quarterbacks, and I'm okay with it. We got 8 picks. We're going to dominate the division forever. But there's no equity in Cincinnati. They finish 3rd and 4th every year. They don't have the great ownership. They don't have the great front office or scouting department, so they have no equity built in. So if you have no equity built in, and then you move off the local kid and he wins elsewhere, you're going to get crushed It's just a PR tsunami you'll never overcome. The reason the NFL can have the draft and free agency is they have so much equity built in from fans that we like the NFL. They've made us happy. Sometimes we bet the games. They've made us money. They have equity built in. So if they do free agency and get some blowback, they've got a lot of equity in it. The Colts with Peyton had equity. The Saints with Drew Brees have equity. By the way, if New England this year decides to get really young and experiment and loses 10 games, they've got equity. Bengals have none. Zero. So the idea of letting somebody like Burrow go where he'll flourish initially, it's just a PR mess that I can understand Cincinnati doesn't want to get into. I get it. I would 8 picks, I'd move him. But it's unfair for me to criticize Cincinnati and not at least add, some context to it. Local kid, had a great year, will sell tickets, and everywhere we move him would probably be a better situation than us, and he'll win immediately, and we don't want the blowback. Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Jameis Winston got a lot of criticism for throwing a league-leading 30 interceptions last season, which is fair. But Bucs receiver Chris Godwin supports his former quarterback and says all of those picks weren't Jameis's fault.
I definitely think he got more of the blame than he deserved. Like I said, I think he's a really, really talented quarterback. Obviously, there's some things that he does that you can't teach, and there's some plays like that he made that just weren't smart plays. But a lot of the interceptions and the mistakes that he made, I would say like at least half of them were because of a bad read on somebody else's part. You know what I mean? And the great thing about him is he's not going to go up there. He's not going to throw anybody under the bus. He's going to own up to it. He's going to take it, and he's going to be a leader. And like I said, like there's respect to that.
That sounds good, but he's been a big interception guy every year of his career.
Right.
So it'd be one thing if it was an outlier, like, oh my God, he throws 9 picks a year, and now he had 30. But he also had 7 pick sixes. So, yeah.
Right, and that's at least 42 points for the other team.
In the NFL, where games are decided by 4, that's like 10. That's 10 games potentially.
Right. And look, neither one of us have watched the tape or broken it down to see if what Godwin is saying is accurate and it really was somebody else's fault. But the numbers speak for themselves, like you said, and it's what you are. Like
right.
It's consistent. And I think both of us kind of went into this season, and really since Bruce Arians got there, like, if Bruce Arians can't turn Jameis Winston around, then it kind of is what it is. And we know what Jameis is, and he's had his opportunity in the league with the team to be the face of a team and show what he can do. And I don't think that Jameis is done, obviously, but I just don't think he's consistent enough and makes smart enough plays to build your franchise around. And I wasn't a big fan of Jameis coming into the league. I felt like him and Mariota were kind of, I don't want to say overrated, but I just didn't love either one of them.
Yeah.
And now we know what Mariota is as well.
Yeah, by the way, so Tennessee, this league's a copycat league, Joey. Tennessee moves off Mariota and has a great year. So you don't think Tampa's looking at that? I mean, this league copies each other going, they came out in the same class. They've both been good at times, but kind of disappointing. And they moved off their guy and got way better. I think that's how this league thinks. I don't think the NBA is a copycat league. I think people do their own thing. It's individualistic. There's a lot of GMs that go one way, GMs go the other. But in the NFL, if you have 2 quarterbacks, Mariota and Jameis, come in the same draft, one team moves off theirs finally and has a great year. Tampa's reading the newspapers. They're seeing that going, Brady, Jameis, we're going to make a move here.
Right. Now, where he ends up will be interesting. I actually think he will end up with the Jaguars, who have the best odds at plus 225.
Yes, yeah.
And the Dolphins plus 375, or plus 375. Yeah, I don't see him going there. Saints plus 375, Broncos plus 600, maybe.
Jacksonville.
And then the Steelers have been thrown out there a lot, plus 600.
But they denied it yesterday. Steelers said it's not going to happen. Jacksonville makes a ton of sense. I mean, seriously, that would give them 2 people in Gardner Minshew and Jameis. I don't have to love either, but they've both shown an ability to win games and be productive. Like, that's good enough until you get the right guy next year.
Right, and you don't have to make a big commitment to him.
Yeah.
All odds provided by Fox Bet. So 2 unnamed Lakers players were tested positive for coronavirus after the NBA season was suspended. The entire team was sent into a 14-day home isolation period because of those results. The players have now completed their quarantine, and the team says everyone is symptom-free, but they will continue to follow the stay-at-home order. So some good news from the Lakers that everyone is healthy right now and staying home.
And they're managing the crisis. This is what they're doing. They had a little crisis. They managed it. I say this again. We're not going to hide in our homes forever. We can't run from everything. I think social distancing through April is really smart, and I'm adhering to it. But the NBA, it's not immoral for them to consider bringing the season back. The Lakers are a prime example. Utah Jazz. Oh, we got a little crisis here. Let's quarantine. I mean, I like people who can manage problems, not complain about them. And the NBA's managing their way through this.
Well, the NBA, like everyone else, is dealing with the same exact thing. Everyone in the world is dealing with this same exact situation. So staying on top of it and having a plan, at least for your organization and your league, is very important right now. There's no need to panic, like we always say. We know what we need to do. So just follow the rules, and this is all temporary. So Washington has the second pick in the draft, as we know. While most believe they will select Chase Young, there's been some speculation that they could be interested in Tua instead. But former Washington quarterback Joe Theismann firmly believes that Young should be the pick, and they should pass on Tua.
Without hesitation, I take Chase Young for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think he's the best player in the draft. And there's an old adage when it comes to taking the best player in the draft. He's not a generational quarterback. Burrows might be, okay? I think so, but Tua is not. I'm not sold on the strength of his arm.
Joe Theismann is kind of like the unofficial spokesman
for Washington. Well, Chase Young probably is the one lock in the draft. Like, everybody knows he's going to work. He's one of those guys. It doesn't matter where he goes, it works.
He's going to be successful.
He goes to Cincinnati, he'd work. So, I think we've had a really good run in the last 4 or 5 years of really, really good pass rushers. It kind of started with Khalil Mack, and Chase Young's, and it seems like a lot of them come from Ohio State. Chase Young looks like to me, there's about 5 guys in the draft that I know will be stars. He's at the top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, everyone agrees that Chase Young is the best prospect at any position. He's the best player in the draft. But there's so many teams that need quarterbacks. You can't just take Chase Young if you need a franchise quarterback. So we know that. Yeah. So I do think he's right. They are going to give Haskins another year. I don't necessarily know that I'd give Haskins another year. But if you don't necessarily believe in Tua, then this is the move. This is the move to make, and then you see what you have with Haskins, and you'll get another high draft pick next year. But they're also in a situation where they have a new coach who has some time to kind of work things out. They're not up against it. He's not worried about losing his job, Ron Rivera. So he has a little space to try and figure out what he wants to do.
Joy with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Line News.
Nick Wright, co-host First Things First, is going to join me, brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. So he is all worked up. Nick is all worked up. So Tom Brady's been wearing number 12 forever, and it's one of those iconic, like Derek Jeter number 2, that you just, Tom Brady comes to your team, and Chris Godwin wears number 12. And it's one of those things in life. It's unspoken. You don't have to be told, you go out with your wife, pull the chair out, let her sit down, let her order first. You don't have to. Nobody has to say that. We all understand that. Similarly, when Tom Brady comes to your team, you give him your number. That is not what Nick Wright believes to be true. Nick, you're fired up on this, I'm told.
Well, listen, let me take your unspoken rules a step further. When you and I go to dinner together, it's not discussed, but it's unspoken and understood. You're picking up the check. And so when Tom Brady, who's made nearly $250 million in the NFL, comes to a team, and the guy who has his number has made a shade over $2 million, is a third-round pick on his rookie contract, you're right. It is unspoken. Brady's getting the number, and it's also unspoken. Godwin is getting a brand new top-of-the-line Mercedes-Benz. And this segment brought to you by Mercedes-Benz. And so I feel the same way I feel about this as someone that catches, someone's 600th home run or 3,000th hit if it goes into the stands. Of course, that should go back to the player once the player pays a requisite sum. Of course, Tom Brady should get number 12. Once he makes it worth Chris Godwin's while, the fact that he was peer pressured into giving it up for no compensation, I find it so unbelievable that I want to believe Brady actually paid him, just no one is saying it because Brady is too classy to just Debo the guy for his number.
You know what? That's actually a great argument, and frankly, I agree with you. I honestly totally agree that if I was Godwin, I would absolutely give Tom the number, and if I was Tom, I'd say, dude, E-Sedan, Mercedes, it'll be. Yeah, I totally agree with you on this. I think it's just what by the way, Tom's also trying to buy. He's coming to Chris Godwin's team. So
correct. And let me, if I may, I apologize. Let me add one more thing. I think everyone involved with the Tampa Bay Bucks is super stoked Brady's there, with the possible exception of Chris Godwin, and here's why. Jameis is not good for your heart if you're a Bucs fan. He's not good for your job security if you're a Bucs coach. But if you're a wide receiver in a contract year, Jameis as your quarterback is actually kind of awesome. He's gonna throw it around the yard. You're gonna have opportunities for huge plays. The Bucs should be better with Brady, but is Godwin gonna have another 1,300-yard season? I don't know, because I don't know what style of offense they're gonna have. So even of all the guys on the team, the one that Brady should try to ingratiate himself the most with is Godwin. And so I'm sure you have back channels to Tom, and I know you have back channels with Mercedes-Benz. Be the intermediary here and make this happen.
No, I think you're right on this. I said this to start our show, is that in times of distress and crisis, there are a lot of psychological ramifications for children in tough households whose parents lose jobs. It's a scary time. I think positive news over doomsday is going to be psychologically very crucial. This is just not an economic crisis and a medical crisis. It's a psychological crisis in our country going forward. And I think the draft is a phone call business, and it's the only 5-6 days of the year in the NFL where all 32 teams win. It's a hope-based talent accumulation business. I think it needs to go on. I think the NFL needs to show strength from its free agency to its schedule release to its draft. It is a phone business, and it makes everybody feel better. And I know I feel better when I go to Twitter and one of my favorite comedians has a funny bit, and one of my favorite musicians is releasing a song in his living room. So I think there's psychological ramifications of this virus where positivity matters, and I think the draft makes us feel good, so I'm not going to bang on the NFL if they want to do it. What say you?
I hadn't even thought about the layers you're talking about psychologically, but it's spot on. And listen, there are things that I think are fair to criticize the NFL for. And things the NFL does that you look back and you say, well, that could have been handled better.
Yeah.
I don't know why one would criticize them for holding the draft. Now, if they were saying we're going to hold the combine, that would be ludicrous. But the draft nobody has to be there. And so we are finding ways to do my television show and your television and radio show so they are similar but not the same. You can do the same thing with the draft. The entire world doesn't have to stop. And your point that we do need little kernels of positivity, because every other time you open Twitter, it's like, okay, Toronto said nothing till June 30th, and Wimbledon was canceled. And it's just stomach punch after stomach punch in what is a slow motion crisis. So I agree with you on that. And I do think that there are some people who operate with the NFL the way, if I'm being honest, I often operate with the NCAA, which is we start from the position of they must be getting this wrong and work backwards from there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why. I don't understand the criticism of them holding the draft. I agree with you.
I said earlier that if I was the Bengals and could get 8 picks, I would do it. But I think contextually, I have to acknowledge Joe Burrow sells tickets. He's a hometown kid. And unlike the Colts who moved off Peyton Manning or the Packers who moved off Favre, or if the Saints moved off Breeze and passed on a Joe Burrow. They have equity with their fan base. They have titles. They have championships. Cincinnati has no equity with their fan base. And if they move off Burrow and he wins immediately elsewhere, that is a PR tsunami that could affect that franchise for years to come. So I would do it, but I don't live in Cincinnati. I'm not an executive for the Bengals. Would you move off Burrow for 8 picks?
I would as well for the same reasons you're saying, and I understand the point, which is the risk versus reward, and that if he turns into a star and you missed on the most obvious pick ever, 60 touchdowns, hometown kid, then your career's over. I get that part of it. But the other reason that if I had the number 1 overall pick in damn near any draft, I would strongly consider moving off it for the right package is something we talked about on the show this morning. Post-Peyton Manning, Colin, number 1 overall picks in the NFL have been far and away disappointments. Post-Peyton, the only one to be a star on a Super Bowl team is Eli. The next 3 best quarterbacks that went number 1 overall, Andrew Luck played 86 games. Matt Stafford has never won a playoff game, and Cam Newton, who evidently half the league thinks is done, and he's 30 years old. Then you've got Vic, who I love, but was best with his second team. Carson Palmer, who was best with his third team. Alex Smith, who was best with his second team. Go up and down the list. Look at it. Number 1 overall picks, like Eric Fisher, who was the left tackle for the Chiefs, who went number 1 overall, is like a median number 1 overall pick. The guy's made 1 Pro Bowl in 10 years. It's not the NBA. It's not LeBron and Zion and Anthony Davis and Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin. It is far more disappointments than superstars. And in fact, since Peyton, only 1 true superstar has gone number 1. So, yeah, I would do it in a vacuum, but I understand why it's tough for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I've said before, Elway and Andrew Luck are the only guys ever, if I have the number 1 pick, I wouldn't trade out of. My rule has always been in the first round, trade down. Number 1 pick, trade down. Now, I saw Elway and Luck where I thought they're good enough to win on crappy teams, which they did. Okay, finally, congratulations for Nick Wright, a Boston radio station, WEEI, which is in a perennial bad mood. There are no laughs.
Always. These guys are so mad at everyone all the time. But go ahead.
The day after the World Series, they complained the parade's too long. They have named Nick Wright as one of the top 3 Tom Brady haters. Congratulations in order. How does that land for you? You must be very happy.
Well, it's one of the pinnacle accomplishments of my career. It doesn't quite Trump being named by The Spun America's most annoying sportscaster in 2019, something where I had to beat you in the Final Four. It was, I had to beat Rome, I had to beat you. I went up against Stephen A. in the championship game. I was a 16 seed. It's really nothing will ever trump this, but this is a close second. What I will say is this. You know who else was on that list? Bill Belichick. And this is my infinity shield against all the people who say I'm a Tom Brady hater. I'm not a Tom Brady hater. I think of him the exact same way the greatest coach of all time thinks of him. Once upon a time, you were awesome. Right now, though, I think I'll roll the dice with something known as a sit-em and see how it works out for me. That was Belichick's call. I was saying the same thing last year. So, yeah, people can call it a hater, but you know what I call myself, Colin. I'm not a hater. I'm not a hot taker. I'm a truth teller, but sometimes those truths hurt people, especially people at EEI in Boston who are just mad at everyone.
Yeah, we'll probably get ripped for just saying that.
Oh, no question. There's no sports going on, Colin. This is the lead of all their shows the next 2 days. And you're going to catch most of the shrapnel because you're so much more famous than me. Like, this is going to become Cowherd Rip Boston on Nesson.com by 5 p.m. I guarantee it.
Buddy, I love you. Hope you and your family's safe. Thanks.
You as well. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, I used to listen to that station because I would get up and work out, and I would listen to the Hub, Felger, and Maz were the guys. I loved them in Boston. Yeah, that's the other station. They actually laughed occasionally. They weren't mad at the world every segment. So, yeah, it's so those guys are terrific. I think I went on with them in the Super Bowl. Yeah, they're very funny. Coming up next. Oh my Lord! If you're drafting a wide receiver, you think it's just a great year. Bad news. Next, The Herd.